I think that fundamentally, the entire concept of like the marketplace of ideas and the entire concept underlining the marketplace of ideas dies.
Our forefathers fought for liberty, individual freedom, self-expression, and the right to self-determination. They created a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, establishing a nation of free individuals who ignited a bright beacon of hope. America's a land where any person, from any background, can succeed, so long as they endeavor forthright with determination in their heart. A melting pot, the greatest hits album of the human race. We gather here today to renew that sacred bond, that oath to freedom. Welcome to the marketplace of ideas.
Now, James is going to give me a visual cue to start talking, but I think people can already hear me anyway. Good evening, and welcome to the show that just as of last week officially crossed the 100 subscriber threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, the marketplace is alive and well and officially triple-digit subs. My God, it's a real show. I'm Kyle Smith, and with me, as always, is a man who I normally introduce as being a scum-sucking, soulless communist who should banish himself to the pits of hell for the betterment of society. But we're celebrating today, so I'm not going to say any of that. I'm just going to introduce James Vagabond.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Marketplace of Ideas, the show that is matching good faith with good fun and trying to make better political discourse. We are trying to rebind the fabric of American society. And to do that today, we've got some excellent guests with us. We've got lawyer and conservative social theorist or
something or other.
Something or other. Welcome, Ryan Mullally. Welcome back for your third appearance. We appreciate you deeply.
Always a pleasure to be here, and I'll try to limit my tap dancing on your filthy communism to the appropriate amount.
I try to keep it out so that it doesn't get tap danced to death, but you know, once in a while I got to speak up for my beliefs. And then we have to celebrate the American independence, we have Canadian Kay with us, who is a former leftist and now finds themselves on the right. How are you doing, Kay?
I'm doing pretty good. Happy 4th, and I don't know. I think we gave you guys 250 maple trees, so enjoy.
Nice.
Excellent. Whoa, and plug the show. Talking shit with Kay and Tallybots. You got to come on, do the self-promotion bit.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Kay. My channel's Morally Loaded, and I stream with Tallybots usually Tuesdays and Fridays, and we do a show called Talking Shit. So come check us out. We're not a real show yet. We haven't crossed the 3-digit mark, but we're inching our way there.
Google
we
it
were
and
a real
get them
show
there
before triple digits. You know, we were a real show. You're a real show
from
too.
From the go. We had it.
Yeah, and I can vouch. There's the moderators in natural law are always in the Talking Shit show. So there's a great crossover there. Good people.
And then for the first time, we have a young conservative, JebTan. How are you doing? Can you introduce yourself? I'm not as familiar with your work, but I've been told by a lot of our friends of the show that you're, a good faith conservative. And from what I have watched, you are a much better faith conservative than many I've come across in the debate space.
Yeah, I mean, it's not much work. I just argue for fun, so I don't have like a platform or anything other than Twitter, JebTan RIP. But for the most part, when people want to have me on for conversations, I jump on, and otherwise I just sort of lurk while I'm working.
Yeah, those of us that aren't reliant on this as an income get to be a little bit more honest with things, don't we? Those of us that haven't made it our life's work to appease the masses by spewing political jargon at them. But that is not in any way a slight towards Ryan, who is not doing this for money. He's got a real career outside of this. Because he's got real streamer numbers doesn't mean that he's a political hack yet. Okay,
I was gonna say I do make money streaming. I'm not at all shy about that, but the ratio is not something that
that was not a sideways
it's not driving my
insult
decision making.
All right. and we're going to get into things today with the way we usually do, with a game that we like to call Strawman Steelman.
Strawman.
Steelman.
Kyle, will you tell us about Strawman Steelman?
Absolutely. And normally I would have it prepared, but there we go. A little bit late, but here we are. So this game, much like it sounds, we give a straw man argument to our contestants. That is to say, a weak, flimsy argument that is utterly worthless. And they are tasked with taking that shitty argument and turning it into as good of an argument as they possibly can, or steel manning it. So with us today in the halls of the heroes of debate, we have returning on my right, we've got Ryan Mullally. And then on my left, we have...
Oh, what a lovely photo.
I know.
Pick the better one for me.
JebTan here, and we've
The pictures themselves are straw men.
All right. Before we go much further into this, Ryan, I'm afraid I have to say that this is a little bit of a revenge mission for me. Somebody, last time you were on the show, somebody got me good. I don't know who it was. They screen grabbed me in a way that makes me look like far more voracious of a stoner than I actually am. Let me see if I can pull this up just to show you their handiwork here. Let's see.
Yeah, much like I'm a moderate communist, Kyle is a moderate stoner.
Look at that. Good Lord. I mean, game recognized game, but they did me dirty. So,
was that from the photo where we're all reacting to the endless monologue in favor of communism?
Yeah, that's the one.
I like that. I thought that was some good fan art. That was pretty good.
Yep.
No. Seriously, much appreciation to whoever pulled that off. But I can't let it go unanswered, and unfortunately, you are the avatar of your community, so I had to get you with as good of one as I possibly could on
You wanted to find a worse one. You don't make a lot of silly faces. People like Kyle and Pisco, there's a beautiful freeze frame every 5 minutes that you can pull out of their stream to make them look like a fool. But you hold frame too well, and I'm annoyed about that. Okay, we need to get more ridiculous photos of Ryan.
There's no way to fight it. If you're on camera enough, you'll get a good frame. So it is what it is.
It does happen to the best of us, though some of us more often than not. But maybe we'll get a good face from Ryan as he reads his scroll of the straw man. Ryan, if you could please read your scroll.
It's easy to pretend to care about democracy when you're in power. If today's Republicans were facing a 3-6 court, they would immediately pack the court just like Mitch McConnell did in 2016.
So Ryan, if you could please defend that argument.
Yeah. Okay. So the first immediate move I would have to make is to change the definition of court packing to be something other than adding justices to the court. So the first move I would say is that court packing is obviously, in this frame of reference, anything that changes the composition of the court other than advice and consent through when a justice dies or retires. So if anyone does anything that changes the composition of the court, that's a you not advice and consent, then there we go. So you have that move where you move the definition of court packing a little bit, and then it's easy. You say, well, the Republicans are they're power hungry. They just want to have their way. That's why Mitch McConnell denied having hearings or even a vote when Merrick Garland was up. It was a power grab, and it was a norm violating power grab. And since court packing is merely a norm violating power grab, therefore you can say the Republicans did exactly the thing we are accusing them of doing, and of course would do the thing that I'm accusing that they would do in this situation because they already did it. So we have evidence to prove that point.
All right, well said.
You know, you did a little bit of unpacking of the fact that you were not quite as honest about your straw man or steel man as you could be. You know, we could see through the cracks a little bit, but we'll let it slide. We'll let it slide.
Well, the key it's difficult because I have to get in character, right?
Yes,
so the first thing I have to do is I have to start arguing like a leftist, and that requires that I no longer believe words have any objective meaning.
You're like, let me shut off this part of my brain and this part of my brain.
It's all just utterances. Words can mean whatever I want to mean, and then you can make the argument.
All right,
Court smacking.
Court smacking, yeah.
So other than seeing you getting into character, a solid steel man. Well done. But what do
Well-
you actually believe?
This is preposterous. Court packing is a term that has a meaning. I must have missed it when the Republicans added justices to the court because it never happened. It obviously never happened. And FYI, if the Republicans were this power hungry to pack the court, they could do it right fucking now. And they're not doing it right now. You don't think that Republicans wanted to win birthright citizenship? Of course they did. You don't think they wanted to win the tariff case, the National Guard case, the male abortion case, the whether we can fire the head of the Fed case? Trump has lost incredibly high-profile cases that define his economic initiatives, and he's lost them. And unlike predictions, he has said, well, that's what the Supreme Court ruled, and we're going to go along with it because that's the law of the land. Time and time again. And the Republicans are not packing the court because it's actually not something that they're going to do. The counterexample is the obvious fact that it's not fucking happening. Yet, despite all evidence to the contrary, we still hear the leftist talking point that obviously the big bad Republicans would clearly do the thing that they could do and aren't doing because they're so tyrannical and evil.
And do you think that's the only thing holding them back is that it would, throw off the balance of power and democracy and start a war of court packing?
No, the people, especially senators, are repeat players in our system. They understand the difference between a norm and a load-bearing norm. Court packing in combination with a Senate break is basically the end of our constitutional system. Let me give you an example, just because people think I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. Let's say the Republicans wanted to pass a law that said it is illegal to register to vote as a Democrat. If you register to vote as a Democrat, you get 15 years hard time. You would say, shit, that obviously violates the First Amendment. That's an unconstitutional law, obviously. Well, guess what? You'd be right. That is illegal. That is unconstitutional. But there's a loophole in our system. If you are willing to break the filibuster, pack the court with a one-seat majority in the Senate and the House and the presidency, you can pack the court with as many justices as you want. You put on Justice Alex Jones, Justice Andrew Wilson, who I was streaming with earlier today, who'd laugh his ass off at this, Justice Mike Lindell, and then you put 45 justices on the Supreme Court, and then you say, hey, Justice Alex Jones, Justice Mike Lindell, do you think the First Amendment stops us from throwing Democrats in jail for being Democrats? And newsflash, they're going to say no. And should that require a constitutional amendment? Obviously. Obviously it should, but there's a loophole in the Constitution. All the senators know it, all the lawyers know it, and it's only dipshit pundits who are pushing this idea, playing with essentially the death of the country when they should fucking know better.
Alrighty. Does anybody else
I have
anything
somewhat
to...
strong feelings on this issue.
Yeah, I can tell. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to this? JebTan, Kay.
Yeah, I mean, my only thing would be Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973. Multiple Republicans were in power at the time. Republicans had been overwhelmingly in power at multiple points since Roe v. Wade. Before Trump came through and we had like a legitimate court that could overturn it. If the Republicans wanted to court pack at any point during those, 40, 50 years, they could have done it. And they didn't. And that was obviously, it was stated as like a number one objective of Republicans was trying to get Roe v. Wade overturned and to be able to legislate abortion again. So I would think if there was incentive to do it, that incentive is honestly gone down now that it's already been overturned in Dobbs. So, yeah, I don't even the argument of, well, the Republicans of today would, and the Republicans prior would not have, I would disagree. I think the Republicans prior had a lot more incentive to do it than the Republicans of today, because we've been getting a lot of wins. So,
Kay, do you have anything to add?
I broadly agree, but I would say that in 2026, politics is deranged, so I don't doubt that there would be a faction of the right who would want to do that. And maybe it wouldn't be like I don't think it would get like a ton of like traction behind it, but I could see the arguments being made. I just think everything right now is kind of fucked up. Now, I don't know that it would go anywhere, but
Yeah.
I think like
But
we're
maybe
in
the
a
Rokanas
unique
of the right
time, and
might push
people
for
are
it.
like genuinely brain broken in some ways. I think a lot of like kind of crazy ideas get floated.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it were to say that like there would be Republican support for packing the courts, I could be maybe more amenable to the idea. But the idea that they would immediately do it, I think in my mind, presumes that there would be overwhelming support to get it done. And I don't think there would be.
Alrighty, that's a good first round, Kyle. Why don't you bring us up the second round of Strawman, Steelman?
This is going to take us to Jeb. Jeb, if you're ready.
Wait. I thought we were going to do K second so that we could give Jeb a chance to figure out how the game works, sort of, you know?
I mean, I can do it. I get it.
He gets it. Okay.
Yeah.
Smart boy.
Alrighty. What are you saying? He doesn't know how to read? Come on. All right, Jeb. There you are. If you could please read your scroll.
All right. The United States is a patriarchal, racist, white supremacist, Christian nationalist, settler colonial empire that abuses its hegemony to suppress democracy throughout the world so it can exploit it.
All right.
Want me to let it rip?
Oh, if you could, please.
All right. I'm going into lefty Jeb territory. Okay. Ignore the Corvette hat. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that we do, right? We have military bases all over the world. What need do we have to have military bases all over the Middle East? The only reason we would do that is to take strongholds to fight against anybody else through imperialism that could possibly get a foothold in any of these smaller nations that have resources that we rely on. Our only goal is to control oil. I mean, it's pretty clear based on where we wage war and when we wage war. And all we give a fuck about is controlling the oil and controlling any raw materials so that uprisings from revolutionaries across the world can never have a chance to even have a budding revolution that isn't undermined from its beginning. And once you do that, you can basically make it seem as though things like communism don't work, when really they could if they didn't have the American boot on their neck.
I think James is going to be particularly excited about the last part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I thought I was hosting the Marketplace of Ideas. I didn't know I clicked on a Noam Chomsky video. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Incredible job.
Well, before the blood rushes to James's head, why don't you say what you actually believe, Jeb?
Yeah, no, I don't think the United States is any of those things necessarily. I think there have been periods of time where factions that believe each individual thing there have had power and have marred like the history of the United States, and that's going to be the story of any nation that's run the way we are, is kind of everybody has the opportunity to grab power. And a lot of wars and tragedies throughout our history have created political moments where radicals get into power. But I don't think that means that that's what we are as a country. I think the fact that so many differing and competing sort of factions that believe each of these individual things have taken power kind of shows that the model of the American experiment in democracy and having so many semi-sovereign states within one country is meant to be self-healing, and meant to, though it'll sort of bump at the walls on each side, it's meant to slowly find its way to like a true middle that we probably will never get to. But the idea is that we keep getting narrower and narrower toward this idea of like a truly liberal state where people have freedom to believe what they want to believe, no matter who or how they were born.
Fantastic. Great answer. Beautiful. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to throw in on the subject?
This is the shit that makes me warm up to vice signaling. Like, because you hear an argument like this, and it's basically somebody being like, can I weaponize the fact that I think that you have some sort of empathy, that I can play like a fiddle and make you defend things that you don't really need to defend? Like, I've been doing some content with author Wilfred Riley recently on X. He wrote a great book called I think it's called "Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me," and one of Wilfred's great lines is when on X, when someone says like, this is, you're living on stolen land. He goes, no, conquered. Because it makes it clear that he doesn't give a fuck. It makes it very clear he doesn't give a fuck about the fact that you're saying it's stolen land, and there's a value in that. Like I don't care. Like fuck you. Like we're done. This isn't 2010, 2020 anymore. Let's find a new argument, lefties.
Yeah, this question is just like I just typed into AI leftist buzzwords and it spat this out. So,
Basically, yeah.
And I
Yeah, I
would
mean-
say that this can't be the United States because the United States doesn't have enough agency to do all this because it's controlled by Israel. So
Good point.
the U.S.
That's
is
actually a good point.
innocent here.
That's like a horseshoe bipartisan answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, it can't both be that the U.S. is uniquely evil and the Jews did it, right? You got to pick one. Pick a lane.
That's my thing is like, if you want to believe, if you take each and every one of these individual things, like patriarchal, racist, like we're not even in the top 10 at being good at any of those individual things. So you just have to assume that at all the things that we're trying to be, we're failing miserably. But then at the few things we're apparently not trying to be, which is sort of like economically efficient and, you know, feeding the poor and making sure they still have disposable income, we're just accidentally way better than most other developed nations at those things.
But you know what? This is a
Because-
legitimate bone of contention. Like when I talk to, because, you know, as an ex-Democrat, I have a lot of friends and family who are on the broader left. And when I talk to them, like they'll say something like about America's racism, and I'll be like, well, of all the nations in the world, America's probably in the bottom 5 for how
Yeah, we're
racist
so
it
bad
is.
at it.
And they're like, no, like America's hideously racist. Well, compared to what? Like, you know, China, where they currently have slavery. Are we more racist than that? Like, you know, because really the comparison
a continuing
point is they're saying,
genocide
like,
as well. You know,
yeah, they're like
racial
oh,
genocide.
They're like we think that America feels more racist than Canada. And I guess that's the end of the list, because if you ever spend any time in Europe, they're way more racist than we are. Just to be clear, like there's way more racist. It's specifically Canada that's less racist than us, and that's about it.
And only kind of.
I'll go
like
back
they,
to
they still
leftist
don't treat
Jim.
natives there that great. You know, they've got. I think they were still doing like a forced sterilization until like the 90s or early aughts. In some cases, not great. So
I'll go back
we
to
might even
leftist
have
Jeb
them
and
edged
say,
out there.
says the all-white panel. Okay, come on.
Oh, you got us burned.
Automatically lose the convo.
Well, you know what? I guess everything we said doesn't count now.
And
Fantastic.
as good of a time as any to transition to the Canadians. Prompt K, if you could please read your scroll to Strawman.
In honor of July 4th.
Canadians ain't know nothing about freedom. They're too busy playing state-mandated hockey games and getting drunk on maple syrup. Why should Americans listen to their opinions about America? And
All right, Kay, take it away.
To thrash Canada.
Americans shouldn't. I don't know. You shouldn't listen to my opinion about America if you don't want to. I am like the least convincing. I care so little about convincing anybody about anything. Perhaps that's just the polite Canadian in me, though, that doesn't want to get into an argument. But no, we're your neighbors to the north, and I think we have an ability to kind of see America for not necessarily for what it is, but from a 30,000-foot view. So I get a bit of clarity because I don't live there.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that...
Ironically, you seem to have almost Steelmaned the opposite at the end there. you kind of it was so much of a true feeling for you that yes, you shouldn't listen to us. That it wasn't even you Steelmanning it. That what you started with your honest position and then said, "Let me Steelman the other side."
Can I co-author the Steelman? Can I co-author the Steelman?
Please.
Go for it.
I recently did a debate with Dev, who is a noted Canadian political pundit. And if you ever wanted to figure out why you shouldn't listen to Canadians as a rule, that would be a good starting point as content goes. Bro called for political violence against conservatives in like the first 10 minutes. So, you know, there's at least some evidence that Canadians, sorry, Kay, shouldn't be listened to. And that was
At least some of them. At least some of them.
Yeah, and no, I would say generally Canada is not super great on freedom right now. You mentioned the stuff with native schools, and if you even like residential schools and sterilization, and if you even question that now, people can you can get arrested and thrown in jail for having just like open conversations about those things. So with regard to that, Canada is not leading the charge on anything. In that vein.
All right.
Well,
I'll be silenced.
Well, that's unfortunate. I have a certain amount of affection for Canada, but But yeah, my understanding is that there are some issues there. It's not a problem-free land like many people on the left in the U.S. seem to think. What is it they say? No solutions, only trade-offs. I'm sure it's still a great place to live, though. Well, with that said, great game of Strawman, Steelman, everybody. Much appreciation to everybody for playing along. And James, before we jump into the conversation, I just wanted to show everybody their place on the creator stock list. Here at the Marketplace of Ideas, we do have a list of stocks that I should be hiding my soundboard there. There we go. Now you should see it
We
properly.
have created an actual marketplace for ideas where you can invest in ideologies with our fake currency grift coin, and you can invest in ideologies, and now you can invest in our wonderful guests. So
You'll see that we have Talking Shit taking up somewhere in the middle of the market share of the creator stocks at a little under 9%. And we've also got on the board for the first time, we've got JebTan. I gave you a hat for your symbol, Jeb, just because I wasn't really sure what to go with. But you do seem to be fond of wearing a hat.
Yeah, I have really curly hair, so when I put the headset on without the hat, it gets caught in it, and then I end up yanking my hair out.
So it's a
That's a good
functional
reason.
decision. Sure.
Yeah.
And then Ryan, I've got a little scroll for you, since it kind of looks like the Constitution, constitutional lawyer, and your symbol is NTLW to stand for natural law. So hopefully you all feel well represented on the creator stocks page. And if anybody is watching and you want to show your support for these creators in the Marketplace of Ideas, you can join our Discord server, for which we have a link in our YouTube video description. And you can spend your fake money, that is your grift coin, on shares of stock on these creators, and that way you can help them climb the ranks to overtake. But who's on top right now? North needs to be knocked down. He's been up there for too long. I bet Non-Fawn's gonna do it. Honestly, he seemed to be particularly invested in this, and
I was going to invest
Yeah.
in Non-Fawn the moment I saw him up there, so yeah.
Non-Fawn has the
Non-Fawn fan,
particular kind of autism that would enjoy this game. Clive McPeterson from my chat has asked, can he create ETFs to provide 2x leveraged versions of your equities and ultimately control and crash your market?
I wish we had enough enthusiasm for that level of involvement. Unfortunately, right now, all we have is a kind of piss shit simulator of supply and demand, but it does work as intended. So, unfortunately, you can't get quite that baroque with it, but you can. You can give your shares to other people, and you can buy low and sell high, or however you prefer to do it. So yeah, hopefully maybe when we get enough interest, we'll be able to fold in all those fun little wrinkles.
You're
There you
planning
go,
to
Clive
continue.
McPeterson. It's up to you to be the creator of the ETF.
There we go.
Perhaps so. Yeah, maybe that's the enthusiasm that we need to finally get us there.
Make
But
your dreams
that's enough
reality.
Indeed. Well, that's enough of our stock list here. We have some discussions to dive into. First, I know that much has been said about the Supreme Court decisions, but maybe we'll just spend a little bit of time talking about some of the big news from last week. There was as Ryan alluded to earlier, there was the decision to make it so that we've overturned what is it? Humphrey's
Executor.
Humphrey's executor v. the U.S. To allow Donald Trump or whoever is president to fire members of different organizations tertiary to the executive branch, but not the Fed. Just real quick, starting with you, Ryan, could you just reflect on this decision and whether you think it was a good one or a bad one?
And how it's going
It's
to affect things moving
absolutely. I mean, the decision to restore power to the executive is absolutely constitutionally correct. There is only one executive in the American Constitution. It's the president. The president has all executive power. That's what the Constitution says. That's what the Constitution demands. Because the president has all executive power, he must have the power to supervise his subordinates. The idea that Congress can create executive agencies that wield executive power, that have agency heads that can defy the president, are not fireable by the president, can just say, no, Mr. President, I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I have other agendas, is transparently unconstitutional. There is no fourth branch of government. I've been asked, how do you possibly reconcile those two decisions? That on one hand, it said, generally speaking, the president can fire the head of any executive agency, but lo and behold, there's an exception for the Fed. There is no way to reconcile those decisions. They were written by different justices who believe fundamentally different things. That's the answer. Like the answer is ultimately that if you have a constitutional purist view, like a Gorsuch or a Thomas, then the Fed decision was wrong. But obviously, there are justices who believe different things, and the opinions were written to reflect different judicial philosophies and different views of the Supreme Court. And the easiest way to understand those two decisions is that way, that they were just simply written by different groups of lawyers with different views on the Constitution. Justice Thomas would never have signed off on the Fed decision. And similarly, Justice Thomas would never have said that the president couldn't have fired an executive officer. So, I think you just have to be honest about that. I don't think they reconcile in some intellectually satisfying way.
So you think that FDR should have been able to fire Humphrey?
I mean, yeah, but I also think the entire New Deal was unconstitutional. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I disagree with about the way the country has been governed since the New Deal era.
Yeah, Ryan's critiques of the courts go back centuries, so we'll have to open that can of worms when we've got time.
We're living in a progressive status quo, baby. Y'all, when FDR threatened to pack the court, we got a whole lot of unconstitutional law passed, and we've been building on it plank by plank ever since. And then we called it the status quo. So we on the right have a lot of work to do.
That touches on a question that I've had that I thought you would be a good person to ask about it is some people have said, people on the left say that we've had a conservative Supreme Court for decades, 50 years or whatever it's said. Can you unpack that for me? Because I know that you disagree and that you say that several of the people that the left wing considers conservative justices were not acting in that manner.
Yeah, I mean, so what happened is the left with Justice Bork, with his nomination, in terms of norm breaking, they broke the long-standing norm that justices were evaluated on whether they have good jurisprudential credentials, good lawyer, long-standing judge, and they attacked him for his views, for his policy position, for his originalism. The result was that after a messy confirmation that the right lost, they appointed Justice Kennedy, who was kind of a middle-of-the-road libertarian type rather than an originalist type. And then later appointed Justice Souter, his main claim to fame was that he had no track record, and then turned out to switch sides and become more of a liberal justice while on the court. So yes, those justices were appointed by conservatives, but then they voted as liberals, and they certainly weren't originalists. I mean, for God's sake, Justice Kennedy invented the constitutional right to gay marriage out of constitutional thin air. That's perhaps the least originalist decision I've ever read. So they were nominated by conservatives, but they voted in the way that the liberals wanted them to vote. So it's a bit of a semantic game, right? Like they're both trying. They broke the norm. They got rid of the justices that the conservatives would have preferred to have, and now they're trying to say that the way that the justices that they preferred voted is somehow on us, and that we've had a conservative court for 50 years. So I find it a bit of, I don't know, I wouldn't call it disingenuous, but it's certainly a convenient labeling.
Well, and what I think they don't get too, it's not just a convenient labeling, it's just an improper one. And I know it's the popular way to think about justices now, if you're of the mind that the Supreme Court currently is sort of like, Trump in Trump's pocket. Is this idea that there are conservative and liberal justices as opposed to textualist and originalist justices. It's like whether it's a conservative or a liberal Supreme Court isn't really material. Those are just sort of proxy terms that media uses when describing originalism versus textualism. But when it comes to justices like Kennedy, and it comes to justices even, we're sort of seeing how some of the newer justices are panning out. But it's like, some justices do seem to have a pretty conservative history, but aren't all that committed to originalism. And there are some justices that have a pretty apolitical history that are very dedicated to originalism, you know? And so it's like, instead of using the proxy term, we can just say it doesn't matter whether or not it's a conservative Supreme Court. What matters is if it's an originalist one, because that's really what's going to help you map out what they're likely to decide on any given case. Because as much as we want to believe that they're all political actors, I believe that the justices vastly, overwhelmingly rule based on their legal philosophy, not on their political philosophy.
Alrighty.
Okay. Do you have anything that you'd like to add? Have you had any reflections about the about this particular Supreme Court decision and your neighbor to the south?
A little inside baseball.
Not so much about that one, but I would say along the lines of like textualist and originalist judges. I think that maybe people bringing, I guess, more leftist-leaning progressive type cases might have a better time getting the outcomes they want if they make more originalist arguments or find originalist ways to achieve the ends that they want, rather than trying to reinterpret language into like a modern conception.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you have anything off the top of your head that you could think of how you might reframe?
Not off the top of my head. Definitely not right now.
Maybe that's why it's not done very often, because it's probably tricky. Unless maybe Ryan has an example that you can think of.
Yeah, it's in one of the recent trans sports cases. They tried to do that. They the idea was that Title IX, which is not constitutional, it's statutory, but just for the example, Title IX bars sex discrimination, and they tried to make the argument that preventing men who identify as women from playing in women's sports is sex discrimination because you're treating them differently on the basis of their sex. So there's an attempt to reframe the arguments to fit within these frameworks. It's not a great fit, and this is why when Justice Jackson says that she's an originalist, everyone kind of rolls their eyes, because we all know she's not. She just says she is, because that's kind of like the thing that everyone needs to say they are now, because Justice Scalia won that argument so handily and everyone's an originalist now. But ultimately, it is a fundamentally different view of the Constitution, and I do think it's meaningfully different. Like the executive power case is a perfect example, because there's a lot of people who are attracted, and they tend to just congregate on the left because this is how the left tends to think. They're attracted to the idea of a group of politically unaccountable experts using their expertise to neutrally guide us into a better tomorrow. And they find that appealing, so they wish the Constitution allowed for it, which it does not. But on the right, we don't find that appealing. We find that horrifying. Like, what do you mean there's going to be politically unaccountable experts who get to do whatever they want? That doesn't sound like a good recipe. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. And that is a fundamental difference in worldview between the left and the right, and also constitutional interpretation, because there is no fourth branch of government in the Constitution.
So what are the limits of that? So you before this decision, you had to have some amount of cause to fire someone. Could you gin that up and use sort of a thinly disguised, trumped up charge to get someone out of there? Not necessarily a charge, but people that have worked plenty of jobs have seen some of their coworkers, when they decide to get someone out, they can do what's called like paperworking you out. Basically, they find a lot of miniature infractions that are rarely treated as serious, but since they want you out, now they will treat them as serious. Was that stopping them, or what sort of things did you have to bring up to fire someone with cause?
Well, that's the thing. Yes, you could try to do that, but then they could take you to court, and they could get an injunction, and likely, depending on who's being litigated, they'd find a friendly court to bring it. You get enjoined at the district court level. It gets brought up to this, so even if you wanted to fire someone, now you're in a year of litigation, and then you might lose, right? But transparently, what the Constitution should say is you are an executive officer. If the president is unhappy with your performance for any reason, he can fire you. He doesn't need a good reason. Like the point, the fact of the matter is that this is his power. It's not up to the Congress to dictate how he uses his executive authority. They can decide the scope of his authority. They can decide whether or not an agency that exercises that power exists, right? And if it doesn't exist, the president doesn't have that power. They can define the broad scope of his power, but they can't decide how he uses it. And if that sounds like it's an awful lot of power to give one man, you're right, which is why we should limit it. But that's the whole, at the end game of the conservative view of the Constitution is a limited federal government. And it is a problem to have a president this powerful, but it's an even worse problem to have an unconstitutional government. So hopefully now that we've won this decision, people will realize it's too much power to give one man and start reining in the scope of these agencies.
Well, and that's what people didn't understand when all the Project 2025 or Project whatever hoopla was going on, was they looked at unitary executive theory like an ideal, like the heritage just wanted a king, but it's like, no, it was more of a red flag. It was like unitary executive theory isn't what we're trying to work toward. It's a theory as to what exists right now, and it's a warning sign of we need to limit the power of the executive as a whole, because we believe that at any point, a president who wanted to be fascistic or authoritarian could immediately and effectively weaponize the entire executive branch and all of its power overnight, because there's really no legitimate checks against it. And so where a lot of liberals will think, oh, the Republicans are doing everything they can to sort of vest power in Donald Trump to be our king, I would argue no. They're trying to clarify that this power has always existed, and it's been abused sort of in whispers. Donald Trump just happens to be abusing it and yelling about it, and it should be a clarifying moment that we need to limit the power of the executive as a whole.
Yeah, a great example is the Department of Education, where it's like, oh my goodness, with this ruling, Trump can exercise all this power over national education through the Secretary of Education. The counterpoint to which is the Department of Education shouldn't exist. Right. So like the problem is we federalize local issues, and now all that power is vested in the executive branch, but we never should have done that in the first place.
Yeah. Is that why Linda McMahon is currently the head of the Department of Education, just to make it look like way more incompetent and useless than it even might be? Just to say, like,
no.
See, look, you don't think so?
She's the head of it because if you want to dismantle something, you can't put someone who loves it in charge of it. She's the head of it because she's willing to take a sledgehammer to the walls.
She's
That's
there
why
to lay
she's
the
head.
smack down.
I'm a little bit more of a Trump pessimist. I think she's there because she was homies with Trump and she wanted to be, and he decided she could be.
If they know that they don't need someone there doing serious academic work, then they can put someone like that. It's,
exactly.
It's cynical,
was similar
but
to
it's not
Trump's
necessarily corrupted. If you just need a stooge to warm the seat, then you put a stooge.
Yeah, it was similar to the evolution of his Secretary of Defense, right? Initially, he wanted like an expert because he thought that would increase his capacity to perform as, the commander-in-chief of the military. And then he realized, well, actually having an expert is sort of getting in the way of what I want to do as a non-expert. And so the next try he was like, let me put a non-expert in charge because that's really going to grease the gears so that I can kind of just do whatever I want.
Yeah, it's tricky too, because we really want to preserve the great successes of the Department of Education, like No Child Left Behind. That was a great one. Common Core, that was a real successful one. Are you guys fans of the ballooning student loan crisis? That was another DOE special. Oh, what about the rising cost of college tuition? Because we took the brilliant move of subsidizing the cost and giving every 18-year-old in the country an unlimited credit card, and then said, why are prices going up? The greatest hits of the DOE are every failure of our education system as a whole writ large. So yeah, I think we could probably move on from that and try something else.
You know what? All these conversations about the rampant executive power and the power of the government being too expansive and needing to be reined in, the Trump presidencies have made me more conservative and more open to that criticism of government. Because if you see it being abused, if it was abused during FDR, I'm not historically educated enough to have an opinion on that, but because it was something I would generally agree with, I would say, well, he may have abused this power and he may have overreigned the executive and etc. But we got good things from it. But now that those executive powers have been established, and I'm seeing it in the hands of someone who I do not agree with, then I have suddenly found the wisdom of conservative big government, knocking it down a peg. So,
Yeah, well, as somebody,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, as somebody who's been most of my life very hostile towards government, I think there's something so beautiful about just seeing all of the power on full display for everybody, like to be able to see and for it to be laid bare. And if you have the opportunity and you can see it, and if you want to change it, there's the opportunity to change it. But I think for a long time, it's been happening in smaller ways, over the courses of decades. And one group would yell about it and cry about it, and then it'd be quiet here and quiet there and a little bit all over, and Trump just comes in and like blows it all up. And I think there's something really I really like to see it just laid out for what it is.
There's something poetic about it, certainly.
Yeah, though there is I think that there's the sentiment is rising, which is good. The problem is there's still a fundamental disconnect, and this is what I mean. The areas where the Trump administration, I think, is criticized on the left for executive overreach are the areas where the executive is supposed to be very powerful. The executive is supposed to have broad control over the military. He's supposed to have broad control over trade, foreign relations, immigration. Those are inherently national and executive functions. Right? Yeah. Where the executive is supposed to be weaker is domestic issues, healthcare, marriage, stuff that's done by the states and local communities because they're intrinsically not national issues. But I think the left sees Trump wielding strong executive power in areas where the executive is supposed to be powerful and doesn't like that, but then wants to wield strong executive power not through a president, but through agencies over inherently local issues, which are not inherently executive or national. So I'm glad that there's a rising sentiment, but I'm a little pessimistic that we're actually on the same page.
Yeah, it really does seem as though really what it comes down to is we're all afraid of executive overreach, unless it's somebody who we agree with, in which case many of us are fairly excited about overreach.
No, not at all. Not at all. The reason that the executive sphere includes things like the military and trade and immigration is because that's an area where the country needs to speak with one voice. You can't have 50 positions on a trade deal. You can't have 50 positions, one for each state, on whether we're going to war. You can't have, military commands dictated by a committee because you'll never win a war and you'll never get something done. Our founders in their wisdom understood that there are certain areas that are inherently executive and inherently national, and it's not every area. That is not like healthcare, on the other side, has nothing to do with traditional executive function. That's just something that we invented down the road as a presidential power. So yes, I hear your criticism. Oh, it's when we like it, it's different. But there is also a baseline constitutional reality.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think that I'm not saying necessarily, I'm not pointing this finger at anybody here, but I am pointing the finger at people who exist, who will espouse the need to tighten the leash of the executive, but when it comes time to it, when their particular politics of preference are in power, then they might not have those same criticisms. It was meant to be an offhand quip, is all. With that said, lest we spend too much time on this decision, there was another, perhaps bigger, more anticipated decision regarding birthright citizenship. And I'd like to start this out with Kay. Kay, a cursory Google search told me that Canada does in fact have a form of birthright citizenship, but it's a little bit different than how we do things in the U.S. Do you feel comfortable educating all of us about how it works in Canada?
I don't know that there's much of a difference. I think if you're generally born here, that you get citizenship, but I wouldn't know the particulars of
the legal
where
history, etc.
Apply. No,
yeah, it just says the Clanker told me that Canada grants automatic birthright citizenship to almost all children born within its territory, regardless of the parent citizenship or immigration status.
And what did they tell you what the almost was?
Well, see, that's the part that I was hoping you might enlighten us on.
Well, I would imagine like things like obviously like diplomats and stuff like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
children
that
to
makes
diplomats.
sense.
That I think we have pretty much a birthright citizenship here. It's just we also don't have as many people. I mean, we have a lot of people coming here now, but I don't think we have as many people trying to come here.
Well, there's the matter of practicality and the matter of principle. What are your feelings on birthright citizenship as they pertain to Canada?
I don't think anywhere like I don't think anyone's entitled to have citizenship if you come to a country illegally and just have a baby here. So I think if you're here and it's legal, that would probably be okay. But I don't think people are owed citizenship, and I think it creates a really perverse incentive for people to come and have children, and to anchor themselves to a country.
I mean, it certainly creates some problems as it goes along. Ryan, I would bet that you have some thoughts about this particular decision. I'd be curious to hear them.
Look, I mean, the Supreme Court got it wrong, but it was very, very close. I would have, if I was on the court, I would have written basically word for word the same thing Justice Gorsuch did. I thought he was pitch perfect on this issue. But look, you take your L's. Like the thing that if I was going to say anything right now, it's like people saw that this was an issue that I was animated about. I was out debating, but like the people that I'm most interested in talking to right now are the black pillars on the right who lose one Supreme Court case and think that the sky is falling and that they can never recover. We've lost tons of cases. We'll win some in the future. The fight's not over. There's tons of stuff we can do to improve the situation. It might take a constitutional amendment, but there might be avenues that are open for future challenges or future laws that can make the situation better. But I think that there's an element on the right that is like so deeply, deeply committed to this issue, or just blackpilling or accelerationism in general, that when something doesn't go their way, they don't know how to react to it. And I would encourage them to like remember that like Roe v. Wade was wrong when it was decided, and it took 40 years to have anything done about that. And it was affirmed before it was overturned. You know, life is long. The arc of history is long. So the doomers need to kind of like find another way to become useful and not get into that kind of nasty pit where they start screaming about Justice Barrett or impeaching justices or court packing, because that's honestly just destructive for the movement they're trying to build.
Or going into accelerationism and voting left. I've heard that out of your chat a couple of times. I heard you talking with Rob, and he was just going off. I think this was during when the Iran conflict was breaking out, and I found myself loving Rob Noor as he screamed at far right people that thought that we were controlled by Israel. That was a beautiful stream.
That was a really good one. Yeah,
that was good for my soul. I felt like Rob and I were both from the same America at that moment. Felt beautiful.
Yeah, the right has a moment of truth that it's coming its way, because a few years ago the left had one, and in my opinion they blinked. Like James, offense somewhat intended, like the crazy communists and socialists and lefties started showing up, and the left had the option of saying, no, fuck you, you're off the team, and didn't, right? And now they're paying the price for that. I think the accelerationists are showing up on the right, and a fight's going to need to be had at a certain point where we're saying like, look, if you can't get on board with a coalition to improve the country with conservative values, then what are we talking about here? Like, we don't need to accommodate you, because you're just going to abandon ship the second anything doesn't go your way. We saw what happened to the left with this. We don't really want to drink the same Kool-Aid. I think that fight's coming. And I think the harbingers are going to be Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Baron Coleman, and their ilk. And it's a fight that needs to be had.
Yeah, I'll just jump in with the stuff on Canada. I did check. And it is, if you're born here, you do have citizenship. It is, the exception is babies born to diplomats. But it is a very small percent. Like in 2024, it was like just over 5,000 non-resident births happened in Canada. So it is a very small amount of.
Yeah. Whereas I think it's
a
like
problem here. Canada has a lot of problems with like allowing immigration here, on like student visas and just bringing people in, like through legal means, despite the fact that we don't have the infrastructure for it.
Whereas I think ours is something like 10% of all births, or something along those lines. It's a substantial figure. It might be higher than that.
That is a bigger number. Also, in Canada, isn't a big problem. Just a quick aside for like people in foreign nations buying property. I mean, I suppose that's probably an issue here too, to some degree. But
it is a big problem.
I've heard that about Canada numerous times. Jeb, I want to give you the opportunity to jump in. Is this an issue that you've been passionate about, birthright citizenship, or seeing the end of it, rather?
Kind of passionate about it, but in the other direction. I'm actually very pro birthright citizenship. I do think that's what the Constitution states. My issue, primarily isn't that, I think the main issue being fought over was what the framers meant when they said under the jurisdiction of, right? My idea here is that to some extent, we still need to hold them accountable to the literal meaning of the words they put on the page. And I would argue, the other sort of similar issue of like the wording put on the page is the Second Amendment, like a well-regulated militia. That holds a different meaning now than it did then, and so we have to opt toward the one that it meant then. Under the jurisdiction of does not share that same discrepancy between what it used to mean and what it does mean now. Under the jurisdiction of, in my opinion, has always kind of meant like, if you can be arrested under the laws of and forced to pay taxes to, and by being where you were born without your consent, you spawned here, and now you have to pay these taxes. Once you're an adult, you have to abide by these laws the entire time, whether you're a child or an adult. I think that is just as much under the jurisdiction of now as it was then. And so to me, while I agree with Ryan's argument that is not what the framers intended with that wording, I think the debate shows that pretty clearly. I think they still need to be held accountable by what they put on the page, or to what they put on the page. And what they put on the page was, if you're under the jurisdiction of the United States, then you're a citizen. And so I think if you can be arrested under American law and you have to pay American taxes, then you're a citizen.
Can I give you a 5-minute pitch and see if I can change your mind?
Do it.
I think you actually know the argument, so I don't.
I'm like 85% convinced to your side. The issue is, I still think they need to be held accountable to what they actually put in the law. So
subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Jurisdiction is a word with many, many meanings. It means a lot of things: personal jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction. What I posit is that what they meant was complete jurisdiction, political jurisdiction, the type of person that the country has complete jurisdiction over. And what is that? What's the difference? You can't draft someone that doesn't owe political allegiance to the country. You can't charge someone with treason who doesn't owe political allegiance to the country. If I'm visiting Japan, they could charge me with shoplifting. They couldn't charge me with treason because I don't owe Japan political allegiance. So the argument starts with the concept that what they meant was complete jurisdiction, not territorial jurisdiction, and then you build the evidence for that on the historic record. So, but if you lock into territorial jurisdiction as the only meaning possible of the phrase jurisdiction in that subject to the jurisdiction thereof, then I agree, you end up stuck where you were just where in the mud where you were saying, because if jurisdiction means territorial jurisdiction, the meaning's plain on its face. There's nothing left to talk about. But the record is very clear, for example, that they didn't mean and they didn't intend for this to apply to people who are here temporarily. And in fact, that the government did not give birthright citizenship to people who are here temporarily. And why not? Because they don't owe us political allegiance, right? They're not the kind of people who have any skin in the game in America. And what they were talking about is people who were here and had declared that they were actually going to be here going forward, that they had skin in the American game. So that's my 5-minute elevator pitch.
Sure. And I'll chew on it. But one thing I do want to ask you about, because you didn't do this. Other right-wingers did do this, and it really pissed me off because the left does this a lot, where Like the presidential immunity case is a good example, right? Trump gets president when Obama was doing all his stuff and everything. Every news outlet was saying it is presumed that if taken to trial over this criminally, that he'll have immunity and blah blah blah, all this stuff. It hasn't been challenged, but we presume that it would be found that the president is immune based on his official duties. Yada yada yada. Then it's Trump up. And all of a sudden, they're acting incredulous that the Supreme Court found that he was immune, despite the fact that you can go back to the New York Times and a bunch of other outlets describing that it is presumed that the president is immune, right? Criminally as well as civilly. I saw a lot of right-wingers pretending that this was the first they've heard of this idea, that you could come here, have a baby, and that baby was a citizen, even though I grew up, like as a child, in the anchor baby era of politics, where that was all I ever heard from anyone was the term anchor baby. And I'm like, are we just unremembering that now? So I would say, do you at least concede the fact that it was generally thought by laymen, maybe not by people who had argued before the Supreme Court before, but among laymen, that it was generally understood that anchor babies were a thing in America that was allowable under American law?
Oh, yeah. It's been an unbroken executive practice for at least 80 years, maybe 100 years, but certainly since like the FDR era, because all wonderful policy traces back to FDR sooner or later.
Hey, we're kindred spirits on that one, my friend.
But yeah, it's been unbroken executive practice. The only people who've been challenging it are like Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation, lawyers doing like deep cut arguments who would bring it up now and again. But in 1868, when this was when the 14th was ratified, 1870, that's not what the federal government thought. And in fact, the federal government denied birthright citizenship to a whole bunch of people who were anchor babies from places like Germany, because that was not how it was understood. That was an understanding that developed 40, 50 years after the 14th Amendment was ratified.
Yeah, you and Lactoid both moved me on that point. Like I had watched you and I talked to Lactoid all the time, and you guys both kind of moved me on what they probably meant. My issue is I still think you need to be held accountable to the words on the page. And I still am thinking, if you're talking about in the context that Section 1 of Article 14, right? Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. I think you are held accountable to the context of, if you are born in, I'm assuming what we're talking about in that context is territory and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That makes me presume that is being said under the context of territory and geographical location, that we're just sort of stuck in the position where that is what the Constitution says, and if we want it to change, we got to do an amendment to do it. And I might support that amendment. I'm pretty pro-immigration, so I'd still have to be moved to even support that amendment, but I could be amenable to it, I think.
Well, what I think they should do now, because obviously the case is lost, right? So let's just be honest about that. The case was lost. It's lost. So you can't just litigate it again. You're going to lose again. It's the same justices, same decision. So what Trump should do now is get the Senate to pass a law that says the following. Visa fraud, where you come here and do birth tourism, because that's actually a crime. It is illegal to lie about your intentions, come here, give birth to a kid for the purposes of giving that kid citizenship. That is actually a crime, but it's not one that's enforced much. We are going to vigorously enforce it, which the Trump administration is already doing. And we are going to pass a law that says if we arrest you for this, we are going to hold you in prison. We are not sending you home, and the citizenship of the child will be determined once your court case is determined. If you're convicted, no citizenship for the kid. And that would obviously tee up a second constitutional challenge, but it would tee up a much narrower one, which is
a much easier one to win. I agree. I would
easier case.
Yeah, I would support that legislation because I agree. I think we do need to address the issue of people purposefully coming and having anchor babies, but I think we need to, in that process, not de-citizen a hypothetical baby wherein people come, they have a baby, they didn't mean to have a baby while they were here on like a temporary visa or whatever, so they just sort of abandon said baby and go back home, and now that baby is somehow not a citizen. Like, I want to make sure that in that circumstance, we know that baby has citizenship because they are 100% at no fault of their own under the complete political, legal, territorial jurisdiction of the United States, and they have no way of not being that way until they're 18 and can freely move back to whatever country their parents were from.
Yeah, and that would be the new court challenge. And in the meantime, what the Trump administration has said they're going to do is that they're going to prosecute this kind of visa fraud, and they're going to throw in wire fraud and other types of charges that hypothetically could be charged but haven't historically, and make it real jail time. So then it's not so funny. Like, okay, you come over here and you try to have an anchor baby and then take the kid home to Russia or China and raise the child there. They can come to America whenever they want. But if you're caught, we're not deporting you. You're doing 10 years hard time. That's a risk that people might be less interested in taking.
Yeah, it's like RICO, right? It's like changing law by not changing law, but just really enforcing the law that was already on the books that we had deprioritized. And I totally love that idea because I'm very pro-immigration, but yeah, I'm not pro people coming here and having an anchor baby, mostly because of the outcomes for those babies tending to be pretty bad. And so they're essentially having this like sacrificial child who's going to live in poverty and be a permanent welfare like leech because they wanted to get citizenship.
I had a question. How can it be said that this hypothetical like newborn child has an allegiance or is under the jurisdiction of a nation that it's not in and has taken no part in? That's a little confusing to me. The idea that you could deny citizenship to this child because they are under the jurisdiction of another nation or have some allegiance to that other nation. It seems like the child as it's born lacks an allegiance to a nation and would thereby be subject to the States.
The child shares its parents' allegiance because they lack the capacity to form allegiance on their own. So like everything else, they are dependent on their parents.
What would happen in a situation where, let's say they were born in the United States and their parent tried to take them back to said nation and they denied their citizenship?
Are you saying like is there a hypothetical case where
Sure.
people could become stateless?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hypothetically possible, and it does, I think, happen on the margins. There's it's a vanishingly small percentage.
Okay.
It's truly tiny. But you've got to remember that, like, whereas some people will argue that we inherited birthright citizenship from England, England did away with birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship, because it's a terrible policy in the modern age, it is not the norm in Europe. In Europe, countries do not give birthright citizenship anymore. So whatever policy problems that you were supposing, the solutions obviously exist because most of the Western nations do not use this policy. So, I mean, I think that yes, there are some edge cases, but most of the time, the answer is pretty clear. If your parents are from somewhere, that's where the kid's a citizen.
I guess there's just something about it that resonates to me with the American ideal of I don't know.
Well,
it just doesn't hit me right.
If we're gonna go ideal,
It's also part of the lore.
Yeah,
right. It's become like such a part of like the lore and growing up hearing
Exactly,
about that.
yeah.
And because babies were had, and you grew up in a time where people were coming into the country and having babies so they could gain citizenship. Like this is part of like the cultural understanding of like what it is or how to be an American, right? So it might not be necessarily tied to the actual Constitution, the way that people have thought.
Yeah,
when you look at it.
I guess I'm just making a vibes-based argument here. The vibes are off. Okay, we should.
I'm with you. I mean, I think a lot
Ryan,
of
you might be
America relies on sort of vibes-based arguments, but in a good way. Like, I do think it is sort of an American vibe to say if you open your eyes in America and you've never opened your eyes in another country, you're an American. Like, that does feel right to me. And I understand that
Thank you for
may not be the
supporting my
most complete
vibes.
argument. Yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
a lot of the American experiment was based on vibes. It's like we don't know if this is going to work better, but we're pretty sure that if we just govern ourselves, we'll find a way. We'll eventually make it to that good middle.
Yeah, I kind of
You're
associate
muted,
it
Ryan.
with.
Sorry, I tapped my mic. New booms. I keep doing that. If I'm going to give the counter vibes argument,
Sure.
When we talk about a country governed by the consent of the governed, we're talking about a social compact. And one of the key issues of a social compact, in fact, the defining characteristic of a social compact, is you get to decide collectively who's in it and who's not. right? So the problem with like birth tourism and the abuse of birthright citizenship is that people are injecting themselves into the social compact against the consent of the people already in the compact, and we're being told there's nothing that can be done about that, which is, as again, that's a vibesy argument, but as vibes go, that's pretty off. Like, the idea should be that people are allowed to say who's in the club and who's not. Otherwise, there's no club at all.
Yeah, but I think there's a vibe argument to the extent of like, we decided early and then we don't change our decision because then any group within the social compact, right, that gets big enough can then decide, you know what, I want the 49% out. So that's why I like birthright citizenship.
I agree with you if what I was arguing for was to change the meaning of the 14th Amendment, but what I'm arguing is that the meaning actually was something different.
Yeah.
Right? Which is what, again, like, I'm not a fan of living constitutionalism, but like, the argument is that the 14th Amendment, as better understood, did not apply to people here, let's say temporarily, which is the one that at least 4 justices seem to agree on.
Well, in continuation with this idea of vibes, I want to move on to the next topic of discussion, and take the temperature of where the Republican Party, or conservatism more broadly, is right now. None of you identify as MAGA, if I'm not mistaken. And there is this idea that MAGA might be dying. It might be evolving. It might be making way for something new to take its place. I know Ryan alluded to the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens trying to sink their hooks into the Republican Party in America, and there's a growing concern that they're going to try and drag it in that direction. Jeb, I want to start with you. What's your diagnosis of whether or not MAGA can survive this presidency? And if not, what do you think is coming to replace it?
Yeah, no, I don't think it can. I think MAGA is fundamentally a Trumpist movement. But I think even if you believe that MAGA is what it says on the tin, and it's a Make America Great Again movement, I definitely don't think you can expect people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson to carry that torch, because they seem to want America to be something it's never been. And whether you agree with their vision or not, they're definitely fighting for an America that has not yet existed, that they want to exist in the future. So it can't be that it's it can't be MAGA as the Trump MAGA, and it can't be MAGA as the Make America Great Again MAGA, because they're trying to turn it into something it's never been. So it can't be, again, fundamentally. I think the future of the Republican Party, a Republican Party that is successful in any way in the future, is one that goes back to sort of the smaller government roots and goes back to bread and butter issues and tones down inflammatory rhetoric and cooperates a little more on sort of like, shared policies. Like, I think before he was primaried out by what's left of MAGA, Thomas Massie was a good example, but Marco Rubio is a great example, where he is very much someone and something who exists prior to Trump, right? He was an up-and-comer running against Trump when Trump was first elected. But now he has enough cred with people who had supported Trump throughout this presidency that he could probably win the next election, but I highly doubt he's going to continue down the trend that Trump has. And I think he's going to focus more on bread and butter issues like housing, getting the government out of like little things in your life, reducing taxes, like a lot of the more bread and butter conservative issues. And I think that's the only way, it's the only path conservatives have forward. Like things like Trump refusing to sign this housing bill that just came through for the Save America Act, like stunts like that just cannot persist for very long without conservatives just failing in every election onward. Because imagine Trump holds tight to this, doesn't pass this housing bill, and then hands it off to whatever Democrat wins next to immediately sign. And then housing gets astronomically cheaper by like year 3 of their presidency. What are we going to do at that point? So I think hopefully in the future, the GOP will be conservative in the small government sense again, and not so much in the enforcing social conservatism sense or enforcing some social conservative ideal of what America used to be, because that is at odds with political conservatism, which is we should be conserving the application of government power and letting people do what they want to do in the most affordable and competitive way possible.
I think that message could win a lot of centrists and even maybe some progressives if you framed it the right.
Yeah, indeed. Kay, what's your take on the state of things as they are, whether they be looking at it from the north in America or the way that things are changing in Canada? I know that there was a pretty big backswing from Trump's being reelected with Mark Carney becoming the prime minister, and I haven't heard much from Pierre Poilievre in the last couple of years. I don't know if he still has political prominence up there. What's your take on things?
Well, first I'm going to answer the MAGA question because I think MAGA will be dead as far as it goes on the right, but I think the left is going to keep dragging the corpse of MAGA around to rally their base, probably like as much as they can squeeze out of it. That's what I see. I hope not. Like, I don't think it's a good thing to be doing, you know. And I think I don't know. I don't even know where I fall anymore. I've just found myself just resisting polarization. Like, that's all I'm trying to do to get through these times is resist being polarized one way or the other, because it's just such a fucking mind fuck to go too far to one side or the other reflexively, or like become reactionary like that. And yeah, that's what I've been really trying to avoid. In Canada, things are it's kind of messed up here too, you know. There is a lot of people who are really happy with the way things are going, and there's a growing sentiment of, you know, people who are unhappy and wish Poilievre had gotten elected, and feel that you know, some of the stuff with Trump and all the stuff that happened right before our election kind of got in the way of that. And now there's talks of like Alberta having another referendum or having referendum to leave, and Quebec is kind of like, there's talks about that reemerging here like we had back in like the 90s. So not awesome in that regard.
Are those treated as like legitimately possible things, or is it because I mean every once in a while down here in America, Texas or California will start to make some noise about how they're going to go off on their own, and I don't think we take it seriously at all, but it seems as that it is given a certain amount of seriousness in Canada, that like they actually might try and break away.
Yeah, so I'm in Quebec. Oh, I'm in Montreal, and Quebec has been wanting, a faction of Quebec has been wanting to separate from the rest of Canada for a very long time. And they increasing, the numbers go up and down. It is probably, I think the last referendum we had was like just under, they didn't win. They got under 50%, but it was too close for comfort, if you will. And then they put it to bed for a while. But every once in a while, especially when things get kind of, like I said, politically insane. It's politically insane here too. So those types of sentiments start, you know, reemerging when people become very unhappy with the status quo. So it is something that I think could happen, but I'm hoping it won't.
Now, is Quebec specifically, is that because of right-wing politics, or is that something that's more specific to like the cultural difference from Quebec to other regions of Canada? My understanding is that
Quebec a language thing. Yeah.
Sure.
So it's specifically a language and a culture, and wanting to preserve French Canadian Quebecois culture and being able to govern the way they want to. And it's not necessarily particularly right-wing in that regard. There is a right-wing sentiment within it, but not, that is not what motivates it. It is really motivated by language, and I think like a national Quebec pride, but not nationalism in the strictly right-wing sense that we usually hear it being spoken about.
Yeah, I don't know that there's like a great corollary for, I mean, maybe you could say that about Texas. Maybe like there's a certain Texas culture that seems to be a bit different from but they still speak mostly English there, is my understanding. So yeah, that's a unique one compared to what we're accustomed to. Ryan, I'd like to bring you in on this topic. What do you think is happening to MAGA, and what do you think will happen after MAGA if you think it's going away?
I mean, I think the ideology, the label will persist. I think the ideology is up for grabs because the ideology's always been up for grabs because it's been defined by a single man who's not going to be the head of the party going forward. What I think is not up for grabs is that the right can't go back to putting up, you know, John McCain's and these kind of like gentleman conservatives who would then get absolutely fucking demolished by Democrats in national elections because when they get called, when John McCain gets called a racist or Mitt Romney gets called a sexist, it's this devastating blow. Like it turns out that what we need are people who, like Mullally in Argentina and like Trump here, and the way that Vance has started to carry himself, are combative and a little bit uncensored and don't seem to be concerned about whether or not they're going to be hemmed in. Kind of like we were saying earlier, like, aren't you going to do a stolen land acknowledgement? It's like, no, I'm not. Not only am I not going to do that, I'm not going to play the game you're inviting me to play because I think it's a foolish game. And I think I can only lose if I play. So I'm going to do something else. I think that spirit is going to be maintained. The question is, what's the political ideology and the policies that are going to come out of this as the party moves forward. And that's why I think it's so important that the kind of the spiritual fight is won with the Candace Owens and the Tucker Carlsons right now, because quite frankly, I don't see any ideology coming from them that's consistent. It seems like mostly clickbaity, mostly grifty, mostly attention seeking, with like a smattering of like being really, really, really anti-Israel. And I just don't see how that a political movement sustains itself on that basis. I think that there has to be an underlying political philosophy. It might be different than like Reagan conservatism. I think there's going to be changes, but it has to be something different than what's on offer there. And that's the fight right now. And hopefully it's one that's won.
Yeah, I think like we are in the era of sort of political combat, and we do want a combatant, right? We don't want someone like Mitt Romney who refuses to engage in the fight. But I don't think we want someone like Trump who just leads the charge and wants to swing and never stop, right? I think we want a counter striker. One of the issues I think Ron DeSantis had as the best possible Republican leader in the last election was he is only a counter striker. And what a lot of the Republican primary opponents did was they were just like, we're not going to even mention Ron. We're just going to leave him alone and make a monologue, and he was bad at it, which sucked. Whatever. In the next election, that's not possible because there's not an incumbent who is not taking part in the race, essentially. And so I think a Marco Rubio or a Ron DeSantis is sort of our ideal, where they aren't the types to go and take massive swings and alienate certain voters from wanting to be a part of the club. But when they are swung at, they relish the opportunity to duck one and throw one back, right? Like Ron DeSantis, when in a combative atmosphere, is very adept, and so is Marco Rubio. And so while I agree we need like a political combatant on the right, I think what most people want to see is a fencing match. They do not want to see a street brawl anymore. We've been exhausted by the street fight atmosphere of politics, and we want something a little more elegant and a little more sort of surrounded by the context of, at the end of the day, we're all going to shake hands and we're going to try to get something done. Because though both sides of the political aisle have been as aggressive as possible, the executive and the legislative have gotten basically nothing done for the past 20 years, and the judiciary's had to handle basically all big moves politically. So it seems like having more of a fencing match will actually be more effective for those who want war than the street brawlers will.
Well, the street brawlers have certainly been doing their best to make political headway.
Good.
I don't know if it's... What's that?
I said they've been eating good.
Sure. My understanding is, I mean, for whether or not he intends to run, I don't know that he will, but Tucker Carlson currently in the third spot as far as the odds makers are concerned for taking the Republican nomination rather in 2028. I'm kind of curious. I want to go through each of you on a scale of 1 through 10. How concerned are you that wing of the party might take over? Kay, I'd like to start with you if I could.
That wing of the party will take over, like the Tucker Candace populist fucking stop.
Yeah, how good
They'll
of a
take
shot do
over
you
the right. I don't think that they'll take over the right, but I could see them starting their own, their own thing.
Like a
I don't
new
think they'll
Tea
take
Party.
over the right, though. I think they would then essentially split the party. I think they could make a populist party, but I am concerned about that probably more than it was based in like actual reality, because the feeling of it is so viscerally like existentially terrifying for these people that have any proximity to like governmental power. But yeah, pretty concerned.
We do live in the most cringe timeline, so I think it's highly plausible at the very least.
I think we got to remember
President
that.
Candace Owens, Vice President Anna Kasparian.
Jesus
Oh,
Christ. But
Right?
I just think
going
people got to
offline.
remember that, like, in federal elections, normies tend to decide who wins the presidency. And that's not always true in primaries, and it's certainly not true in our little online communities. So while I think there's some disproportionate noise that's being made, one of the lessons from Trump is that one of his unique political superpowers is that he could run hard to the right and still have a strong base in a national election, which is not the norm. Most people, if they pivot too hard to the either extreme in the primaries, they pay for it dearly in the general. And I don't see another politician who has that particular superpower. So I think, like, even if you hear JD Vance talk, who people forget what a talented campaigner he is, because it's not a campaign season right now, but the dude is a monster on the campaign trail, like an absolute monster. And I think what you're going to see is a little bit more of the classic politic where there's a gesture in the primaries and then attack towards the center in the general. And that's going to feel a little bit more familiar. Hopefully that means that the ideas stabilize a little bit. But on the flip side, there are some really, really bad ideas out there. And we're talking about the right, and I'm trying to be transparent about my criticism of the right, but the left is openly electing socialists and communists now. So, we are getting to a very dangerous point in terms of like what the menu is, right? So
I felt the heat coming off of James's heart when you said that they're electing socialists and communists.
It's just like, okay, like at a certain point you got to say like, well, we really do have to win some elections if we're going to be serious about not becoming some kind of socialist communist hellscape with James and his board of what would be his experts dictating, how much internet allowance you get, Jeb. Hopefully you've been good this month.
Listen, no, I get it, but I think one of the things that I'm smacking Democrats around for right now, because now all the online Dems, their biggest war is against the commies, and I'm like, what the fuck did you expect? You've been selling 65-70% communism for the last 2 decades, and you're surprised that the 100% communists are starting to get some sway? Like, of course, like you've been selling this idea that government involvement is good in most, or if not all cases, and now you're surprised that the candidates who want to follow the logical conclusion of that ideology are gaining traction in your party. I think the same thing is true for the right, where if we don't start to get back to small government principles and reeling in power and not being as bombastic with the moves that we make politically, we're lending credence to fascism, because that's the socialists of our party. And we're lending credence to people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens when every time we lose, it's a conspiracy, when every time the left seems to gain ground somewhere, we're all of a sudden okay with the government intervening and exercising power to undermine their efforts. We need to get back to this idea of we can't sell 50% fascism and expect fascists not to get a foothold in the party. We need to sell 90% government apathy with only a little sprinkling of government where it is effective. Otherwise, we're going to start giving fascists a foothold in the party. And I do think, I think the term is overused in modern politics, but if there was a fascist looking to engage in modern politics, I think it's Candace Owens. I think Tucker Carlson is becoming kind to that kind of ideology. So, I think this is an inflection point for the GOP to where we decide, do we entertain that, or do we look at the mistakes of the Democrats and realize if you advertise fascism in part, eventually you're going to have to contend with fascisms in your party.
Well, I think we've been going on for an hour and a half now. I think we were going to let some, especially Ryan, who's been streaming for 10, 11 hours now, get out of here pretty soon. I did write an essay for this beautiful holiday, the 250th celebration of our nation. And so it has nothing to do with communism, Ryan. You're going to be okay. It's not going to be 15 minutes long. We're going to be okay. I think you'll enjoy it, actually. And then
Thanks for coming on the show. Let me read to you out of my little red book. It'll only take an hour, comrade.
God bless America. And then I think we'll just play. We were going to have a discussion around that, but we basically just had the discussion that it was going to be something about how do we come together, how do we get past this time in politics. We got a little bit of that discussion in there, and more importantly, I think we need to let Ryan get some rest because he's been at it all day. And then
with that said, Ryan, if you would like to stick around for a couple rounds of a game that we like to play on the show that involves podcast prisoners and presidents and maybe adjudicate a few upcoming elections, you're of course more than welcome if you have the energy.
Yeah, I do love that game, but this is hour 12 of me streaming today. Yeah. So I'm going to call it a Jew once we get to the end of the scheduled programming.
Alrighty.
All right.
Alrighty.
Take it away, James.
I don't have a title for this, but we'll just get right into it. On April 19th, 1775, a people suffered under the rule of a tyrant. They cried for justice, for fair representation in the governance of their lives, or perhaps even simply for the tyrant's grip to relax even but a little, so that they could breathe and live. But old George said, to hell with that, and history tells us the rest. A great multitude of people banded together in a coalition of free people and rose together as one, boldly standing united against an empire. They took up arms in honor of liberty, in order to regain their birthright, which is the birthright of all mankind, those inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They overthrew the centuries-long claim that kings had the divine right to rule, that God himself had chosen them. Instead, we proved that which has always been true, that we have all been endowed by creation with rule over ourselves, and that governance can only stand unopposed with the consent of the governed. So dear to them was their freedom that they risked everything in order to secure it, and still to this day we live as brothers and sisters, as free individuals under the greatest banner of prosperity and justice the world has ever seen. On July 4th, 1776, we, the people of the United States, declared our freedom to the world, and so it has stood ever since. But it has not always been easy, and justice has not always been perfectly served. It takes more than a declaration to attain and protect something so precious as liberty and human dignity. Generations of Americans have had to fight for that enduring freedom, and each generation has made its contributions to create an ever more perfect union. Each has shouldered its unique burdens and struggles to increase liberty while protecting domestic tranquility. This nation, its laws, and the justice they enshrine have been a continuing dialogue between free people. Our union is a living thing that requires our continuing devotion. Since that day long ago, this nation has won many victories on behalf of democracy, of freedom, and of the human spirit. We have fought wars in strange lands across the globe. We fought and won 2 world wars. We won the day against the threat of authoritarianism and ripped down the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Marxists. And this nation has sacrificed to do so. Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." On September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was murdered in an act of cold blood that has shaken our nation. One person decided that the law, our nation, and the bonds of justice that hold us together as people were beneath him. I'm of the far left, and many of my political camp have celebrated this act. but that is to celebrate the death of justice, of free speech, and of freedom itself. Thankfully, today, the process of justice is reasserting itself. The man who is evidenced or accused to have taken this heinous action is facing trial, and hopefully justice is served by this process. In many ways, we have grown apart as a nation, but in this aspect, we must stand firm. We must continually avow ourselves to take up this mantle our forefathers have left us. We must continue to look for the things that bind us as free individuals, as a nation, and as a people in one voice, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Wow, I didn't see Ryan's face contort that much at all when you were reading that. That
Yeah,
was
I'll just cut to the bit there that does that, because the bit he left out is that if you value the values of the Declaration of Independence, which, as Calvin Coolidge put it, are final and unalienable and eternal, one of them is property rights, and therefore socialism is a moral evil. So, since we are all in agreement on this point, we want to preserve the values in the Declaration of Independence against the evil socialists and commies. James, I welcome you to the right, and I'm glad that you have renounced your vicious leftist ways. Because you clearly won't take back everything you just said, right?
No, I believe in that more than my devotion to the words of communism or socialism. Absolutely.
Well, it's a strange communism that coexists with property rights. You're going to find that that's going to be a tough one.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Fair enough.
Well, you know what? Thank you so much for coming on, Ryan. We really appreciate you giving us your energy after that long stream you did today. We really appreciate you coming by, and we hope you all had a good time.
yeah.
Hey, thanks
and,
a lot, guys.
Absolutely. Before you head out, where can people find you, Ryan?
Yeah, so I'm at Natural Law with Ryan Mullally. You can find me at Ryan C. Mullally on X and YouTube. Probably doing a bunch of Charlie Kirk stuff this week. Will I be live streaming the whole thing? I don't know. I got work to do, but I kind of want to see it all. So TBD. I'm going to sleep and see how I feel tomorrow. But thank you all, and I appreciate the conversation. And as always, friends, have a wonderful night. I'm going to bounce because I'm tired as hell. But good to see some familiar faces, and hope we can do it again sometime.
Thank you,
Excellent.
neighbor.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We'll see you next time. And now, Kay, I think I recall saying that you had some a place to be late at night. I hope we're not keeping you
Probably
longer than
bed,
you
I
intended
presume.
to. Right. Well, maybe. But if either of you would like, we do have a game that we could play in just about 15 minutes that examines some upcoming elections. But no pressure. If you have other things that you need to do, do not let us keep you.
I'd love to stay, but I really do have to sleep.
No
That's
problem. No
understandable.
problem.
It was great to be here, though.
Yeah,
thank
you.
you guys for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing some Canadian perspective to this discussion. I think that the reach of these cultural shifts are often they go far beyond our own country and extend to our neighbors. So it is nice to have a little bit of that insight into this discussion to give it something beyond what we normally are used to, as we just get
I spend most of my time thinking about American politics these days.
Ah.
So it is nice to get to reflect
Excellent.
aloud on what is going on here.
Well, yeah, we're happy to have you on to do so, or to talk about the plights and tribulations of your own nation anytime. Before you head out, though, Kay, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at Morally Neutral, and I stream a couple times a week with Tally Bots. We do our show called Talkin' Shit, and come hang out. Will be a real show soon.
Yes.
You're a real show.
Yeah,
You're
I
a real
watch
show.
you guys regularly.
I tease. Don't worry. But thank you guys for having me on. Have a good one.
Have a great night.
We'll
Thank
see you
you.
next time.
See you later.
And Jeb, to our first time on the show, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had a good time. If you'd like to stick around, we've got a quick game that we could play, unless you have other obligations.
No, you're good. My Mondays, other than work, are pretty good. So
Excellent.
I'm down if you guys are willing to play with one gamer.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. And we have a game that I'm particularly proud of, and I think James is too. It's a game that we use to adjudicate all various sorts of categories of people, and we like to call this game Podcaster, Prisoner, President.
Podcaster, prisoner, resident.
Now, you may be familiar with the game Fuck, Marry, Kill, and this game is very similar to that. This is where we take 3 individuals and we categorize them by whether we want them to be a podcaster, that is to say somebody who can espouse their opinions to the world but doesn't have any real power or authority at all, or whether somebody should be a prisoner, that is to say they are cut off from the world and they're not able to sway an audience or have any actual governmental power, or somebody who could be president, that is to say, the president of the United States of America, and have all of the authorities and restrictions contained within that role. And for the purpose of this, exercise, we're going to assume that that president has enough of a mandate to actually enact their agenda. They're going to have enough power within the legislature to get their policies through, and they're going to have. They're not guaranteed a second term, but they are guaranteed one. All right. So then,
Alrighty.
We're going to start off with something that is perhaps on the other side of your political leanings. We're going to start off by looking at some Democrats. We're going to start off by looking at Gavin Newsom, the current.
I already know where my prisoner is, so.
Well, don't speak too soon, because up next we've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh yeah, this is going to be an easy one.
Listen, I'm a California Republican, okay? You're asking me to put my rapist in anywhere but prisoner. Rapist.
Well, I don't know. Maybe John Ossoff will complicate the decision-making process. I don't know. I can't speak for you. So I'd like for you to speak for yourself. How would you sort these 3 individuals by our 3 categories that we have here?
So here's my issue, right? Politics is a little bit like a video game. Okay? You have to think of what each side's power is, and the Democrats' power is pervasiveness. So I'm going to pick some people you wouldn't expect to be in power, but that's because I think their ideas aren't as subtle and pervasive as the man I'm putting in the prisoner section, which is Gavin Newsom.
All right,
because you can't.
We'll just
that. You can't pretend AOC's normal, all right, and not trying to pull some bullshit. So I'm going to go ahead and give podcaster to the very eloquent speaker John Ossoff.
Okay.
And I'm going to make a party of no play for the Republican majority under an AOC presidency, and just say we're gonna muck the gears enough, and the public is going to be annoyed enough that someone that extreme became president that I think we'd have an easier time halting progress to the left under her than we would under Gavin Newsom, where people can pretend it's like normal shit happening.
Yeah, if you can't vote for your side, you vote for the worst of the enemy side, so that they get sick of their own people. Beautiful.
Or at least at least the most honest. AOC is who she says she is. She is who she says on the tin. Gavin Newsom is actually Satan and has the power of possession, it seems, because that dude can do everything wrong in the same flavor as Trump. But people are like, obviously the best possible Democrat nominee, the moderate, the whatever. I'm like, no, get him out.
All right, I've been handed a very jaded, positive view of this Gavin Newsom fella. What are the specific failures and mistakes that you'd criticize of it?
So it depends which ones you're talking about. And from the hypocrisy point, I would say Gavin Newsom literally fucked his best friend / campaign manager's wife and got a promotion for it, because that's what he did when he was San Francisco mayor and then became the governor, and a presidential favorite. But from a leadership perspective, he has been just remarkably terrible at executing on things he had overwhelming support for from one of the most one-sided state legislatures possible. So, I mean, I can't tell you, there's supercuts of him talking about how homelessness is the number one issue and it's going to be solved in X number of years since he was San Francisco mayor. Literally everywhere he has led, homelessness has gone up under his tenure. He was going to make sure that Hyperloop or whatever got done from LA to San Francisco. That is now essentially a defunct project, but he's claiming victory on potentially in 5 years and $19 billion getting a train from one place nobody wants to go to another place nobody wants to go to. He is just remarkably bad at just getting things. Like, he is the executive. His job is to execute. He has literally no inhibiting factors to his ability to execute. He has a state legislature that'll do whatever he wants, and a voting base that'll do whatever he wants, and he can't seem to get anything done ever. Like, but he has this thing about him where people still believe he is like this political savant, but I think it's mostly like an insider thing. He's like a person that non-charismatic people think is charismatic. Because you'll hear a bunch of Democrats be like, listen, yeah, he's not that great of a political operative, but he's very charismatic. And it's like, I'm hearing someone tell me that he's good at getting people to buy what he's selling that are admitting in the same breath that they don't buy what he's selling. And then no one on my side buys what he's selling. And then all the moderates I talk to say that they think he's like a used car salesman. So he's like this person everybody says is charismatic, but nobody would buy what he's selling. So it's like, he's just a bad at his job person. He is just not good. And I think him being anything is a problem because of how pervasive he is as just a moderate Democrat. I do think moderate Democrats of most flavors are dangerous in the sense that they do things to move the needle in a way that no one notices. And that's why the Overton window is slowly sort of moved left, is nobody realizes that sort of extreme things are happening. But then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a place where once we finally get like what I consider a good Supreme Court, we're having to unravel just nationwide unconstitutional gun laws and things like that because nobody really notices it's going on. Whereas Ossoff and AOC, Ossoff is like a progressive Dem. AOC is obviously a sort of outspoken Dem-sock kind of vibe. I think people know exactly what they're dealing with. They understand that acquiescing too much is dangerous. Neither of them would necessarily have like unanimous support from their own party. So I think they would just be an easier train to stop because people would notice.
Well, remember,
the direction in which it's going.
For the purpose of this game, though, they will have enough power to enact their agenda. So,
okay.
You might have some misgivings about Gavin Newsom, but if you knew that Ossoff or, I mean, I can only imagine AOC would be a tougher pill for you to swallow, would that change the way that you organize these folks?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Just maybe because, like you said, I truly believe in that sort of libertarian ideal that the proof will be in the pudding. And maybe we do need an AOC to sort of trump her way into some really intense policy decisions that fall flat on their face for people to be like, oh shit, we don't like that.
Well, if it weren't for a few snippets there, I would have thought that Lefty Jeb came back to visit again. There was a lot of things that I would expect from somebody who is far more to the left. It wasn't until you started talking about the dangers of modern Democrats moving the Overton window towards the left that I'm like, okay, this is a more conservative perspective. But interesting to hear a conservative express a desire for AOC over Gavin Newsom for president. Now, I'm curious, James, do you agree with this arrangement, even if you agree with it for different reasons?
I've done this one before, and I think I went with Ossoff because I think he has a little bit more intelligence for governance. Although AOC's shown themselves to be capable of moderating in order to gain power, etc. I think I trust John Ossoff to have a better understanding of the way to steer things. Gavin Newsom. Well, if I'm doing Ossoff president, then I would rather listen to the AOC podcast. I don't know. I mean,
she flip-flops way less. I mean, I think that a podcast with AOC would be more entertaining than one with Gavin. Gavin Newsom, he kind of has the Joe Rogan problem where he'll he'll shift he'll shift his mood and his perspective to better match whatever guest is on at the time, and maybe not to the same extent that Rogan will, and it expresses itself differently. But a lot of his problems come from when he'll on one day he'll say that Israel is an apartheid, or Palestine is an apartheid state, and then the next day I'm like, well, no, I know obviously that's not true.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that.
No, he is. That's what I'm saying. He is the political shill, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at how masterfully he's playing them." But nobody really knows who they are
It's
that
not
he's
me, of
tricking
course.
because
I just like
yeah,
the guy.
literally, yeah. Everybody on the Democrat side and the Republican side is like, "Oh, look at how he is good at working the public," but then like nobody actually is buying what he's selling. So I'm like, who do you think he's convincing?
Yeah, well, I mean, perhaps fitting that was the easy choice of these three, is that regardless of whether we put AOC as president or John Ossoff as president, what we do know is that Gavin would end up behind bars between this trio. All right, let's go to our next round. This is something that might be a little closer to home for you.
Wait, before you do, Kyle, why don't you give us the rules for what the president is? How will we end it on that?
The president is going to. They're not going to win by an overwhelming Reagan-esque landslide, but they will have enough of a vote, a solid majority,
like a 52-54.
Okay.
Maybe even like a 55-45, something like that, where it's like decisive victory. And this is the important part, they'll have enough power within the legislative branch to enact their policies. Like their vision for what the country will look like will actually come through. And that is especially important as we ponder some folks who you might be considering in a couple of years, as we look at J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Tucker Carlson. Just as we looked at the top three possible contenders for the Democrats, here we have the Republicans. So how do we organize these three gentlemen?
This is the easiest one I've ever seen. Okay, so
be.
We're all tired of hearing Tucker Carlson in media, so he can go in prison.
Yep.
Easy. J.D. Vance, I think
send him to Russian prison, okay? He needs to go to a worse... Actually, they'd help him out.
Exactly.
There. They'd put him in witness protection there.
J.D. Vance is an underappreciated entertainer. I think he is a great writer, so I think he'll be a great podcaster. He is a very human guy, and I think he'd be great as like a conservative person who gets people to want to be married and have kids and do the thing, and he's going to be great on the Dave Ramsey Network. Marco Rubio, that's my president. I would vote for him. And very few people I've had the opportunity to vote for that I was enthusiastic about potentially being president. Marco Rubio would be one where if he won, I would genuinely be like, man, that's one of the good ones. I'm happy about that. So. Now,
the one concern that we've talked to with some never Trump Republicans is that while Marco's certainly the most favorable possible candidate of what we're likely to get from the Republicans in 2028, that he's too close to the MAGA stench. Does that not bother you as much as it does some others?
No. So what I see when I look at the specifics is a lot of what he'll defend MAGA on are where MAGA has allowed him to do what he wanted to do anyway. So like the conflict with Iran, Marco Rubio had like a pretty famous at the time impassioned speech about the Iran deal when it first passed. Like Iran has been a pet topic for him. He was very not okay with the JCPOA. He really wanted something more stringent. Same thing with most of the other things that the Trump administration is doing. And the Supreme Court when he defends them. I don't see a lot of Marco Rubio's policy objectives having changed since he was a Trump opponent. What that tells me is he is willing to don the cloak of like a MAGA friendly while operating in my interest. And I think the moment he no longer needs to don the cloak, he'll shed it and he will just be who he has been. Which is someone who wants taxes to go down, regulation to go down, spending to go down, in kind with taxes. He's one of the few people who will speak out when the Republicans cut taxes, but not spending. He's not a libertarian by any means. I'd obviously prefer someone like Massey or Rand Paul, but at the end of the day. Like, I do think Marco Rubio still believes in everything he ran on in 2016. And that was a ticket that I liked a lot more than Trump. I was a big Cruz person in 2016, but like Marco Rubio was option 1B for me. So like, I don't see any evidence that his policies have changed really.
Well, here's a question on that same idea of whether he carries too much MAGA stench. Maybe for you he won't, but for others he might. And one question that's been posed multiple times is, would the smart political strategy move be for Rubio to sit out until it's time for 2032? Or is it better to capitalize on the momentum that he has coming from the Trump administration and run in 2028? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd capitalize. I think the Democrats have stumbled over their own feet a lot lately. Like, you're even seeing the slam dunk midterms start to like go down for them. So I think there was a time in which I could see that argument's wisdom. And like, the Democrats are gonna win the next election, so he might as well not have the L on his record. Because in our modern political era, you're right. Like, everybody wants someone who they think can win. Like, that's really the number one objective of everybody on each side. I don't think it would be that hard. I don't see who the Democrats put up next that would beat Marco Rubio. Newsom certainly wouldn't. And I don't know who's behind him, because the Democrats are really non-committal in that regard. And now that the DSA candidates are starting to win, who knows who the DNC is going to nominate in sort of a desperate attempt to unify the party. I think this could be a really unique opportunity. Whoever is the next nominee for the Republicans also will have a big say in what direction we move in. And I would really like for that to be Rubio as opposed to Vance.
Even if Rubio were to lose, are you concerned that his vision for the Republican Party would also lose with him? Or do you think that it would still have some staying power?
I think it would have staying power. I think people are adversarial enough in their view of politics that everyone will have a reason why it's like the crazy Democrats' fault, why Marco Rubio's great platform lost. It seems like no matter who ends up being the nominee, the GOP will unify around that platform and then just cry foul as to why they lost. I don't love that, but that seems to be the reality. And it seems to be the reality on the other side too, but in a different way. They're not going to cry that the Republicans cheated. They're going to cry that the Republicans are all racist, like ethno-nationalists, and that's why. But I think whoever's the nominee will still have sway, even if they lose, right? Because Trump lost once, and that didn't seem to slow his momentum as much as I would have wanted it to.
Yeah, I mean, there were some key moments that I felt kept him in the limelight, and I don't know if Rubio, if Rubio,
someone's got to try to shoot Rubio so that he survives it and becomes the president.
Yeah.
To clarify, TOS enforcers, I want him to live, okay, so that he'll win the presidency.
Yeah, we are not advocating for anybody to be shot on the ear or other body parts.
Nope.
Whether there's a fireman standing behind them or not.
Jesus.
James, I feel like we've done this one a couple times. This is where we normally end up, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of open.
Tucker's the one who has no soul. J.D. Vance has sold more of his soul, and Marco Rubio has only sold enough of his soul so that he can put himself in an advantageous position, which is, that's an understandable thing.
I mean, he's not who I would prefer, but he has neither Vladimir Putin's nor does he have Peter Thiel's hand up his ass. So I would, given the choice between these three, I think that's probably how I would do it as well. All right. I have one more round of podcaster prisoner president to queue up here, and you alluded to the hot midterm races, and I will be exploring some of that with this round as I queue it up here. So first up, we have
this one involves Graham Plattner. We might as well move
I was going to say
James Tallarico. We're going to be looking at some Democrats who've been making a lot of headway and carrying some momentum. James Tallarico, of course, in Texas, running against Ken Paxton. We have Abdul El-Sayed with Mallory McMorris dropping out of the Michigan race. It looks like it very much will be El-Sayed taking the Democratic ticket. And third, in third we have a monkey who draws with street chalk. So, with these three individuals, how do we sort these three?
Oh.
Well, I had to make it a tougher question then, because
Yeah, given what we learned today, we had to modify this question.
Oh god. Oh. Ee. Ooh. Ah. Grape's not good. Don't do it. What do you want me to say? All right.
I'm trying to think. Is the monkey that draws a street chalk an abundance Democrat?
Probably not. Like,
well, they're against regulation that says you can't draw on the chalk with the chalk on the sidewalk.
True.
That's
Yep.
abundance pilled.
So they might have some like thoughts on zoning restrictions for that reason.
Yeah, the issue is initially I liked Tallarico as a person, but he's started to come off increasingly dishonest to me. And more stuff has been uncovered as his past rhetoric, and it does seem like what I thought was a more honest veneer was actually more of a put-on pivot so that he could become more electable. But Abdul El Sayed...
Do you think he's a trans vegan?
No. I don't think he's a trans vegan. I do think he's gay.
He only eats trans vegetables.
So I thought he was gay when he did his initial big press run, and people got super confused, and I would be like, yeah, that gay Democrat congressman that was on Rogan. Like, that's always how I referred to him, because I didn't know his name. And then everyone was like, who the fuck are you talking about? I thought he was gay the whole time, which I don't have a problem with, but I don't think he's trans, but he's halfway there.
I didn't realize he was pinging my gaydar until you said that. Because, like, when people said trans, I was like, probably not,
Yeah.
You could do a lot with
he's not nearly fashionable enough
days.
to be trans. Yeah. Barely fashionable enough to be gay.
Yeah.
Well, this is the plight of any soft-spoken, gentle man who might be interested in women, is that there's just something a little bit gay-coded about that style of communication. I'll take him at his word that he is indeed getting married for love and not for political purposes with his oncoming wedding. But you said with his growing dishonesty, in your view, is that dishonest enough to throw him in jail, or is that going to go to somebody else?
No, well, I really want the monkey who... It might be just because I want the monkey who draws a street chalk to be the podcaster. Okay. I feel like the Theo Vaughn collab there is a no-brainer. No, the Theo Vaughn collab there would be a no-brainer.
Sure. I mean, perhaps the Theo could showcase... he might just show the monkey. Let's be honest, the monkey's doing his best, but so far he's like having a hard time with circles, it looks like.
Yeah. So I'll put Abdul in jail. He's more of he's not a DSA member. He's more of a devout, like, DemSoc kind of person. No, don't love it. He's got endorsements from all the wrong people for me. And I do think Tallarico, from a policy perspective, I actually really look forward to the Republican Abundance Dem collaboration. I think it'll have a similar effect to the, like, Newt Gingrich Congress and Bill Clinton, which had a lot of really positive outcomes that came out of that in terms of balancing the budget. So I'll say Tallarico for president, because I think Republicans would have a lot of opportunity to get some wins in terms of housing deregulation, because he's not like an abundance Democrat, but I believe I have heard rhetoric from him about replacing at least some, like, low-hanging fruit housing regulations that really make things, like, stupidly annoying to build in dense areas, at least. And I think he can be nudged more the abundance Democrat direction. My perfect Democrat is like Ezra Klein. Like, I would have no qualms with Republicans straight up being like, let's get Ezra Klein in a room and try to find some housing policy we can pass that enough Democrats will bite on to get through the legislature.
Interesting. I'm curious. How does that resonate with you, James? Being a Tallarico,
I adore Tallarico.
Okay.
Just beautiful morals. Like, I consider myself something of like an atheist or agnostic Christian. I still keep a lot of the Christian morality.
A cultural Christian, if you will.
Yes, a cultural Christian, and Tallarico slays with that and that message. Yeah. He knows how to speak the philosophical underpinnings of leftism through a Christian lens, and I think that could help him reach further towards the center with a compassionate message, and I really appreciate him. I um I was I was just looking it up, and his name means the etymology of it comes from noble power, but also in Brazil it means like betrayer who bangs your girlfriend. So
well, we know it's not that.
So I
We
was,
know
I was picking up on something, but
you sussed out those vibes, but maybe not
yep,
not exactly. Yeah,
not in the right orientation.
definitely Talarico president. I'm not as familiar with Abdul Al-Sayed, and for that reason, he may have to end up in prison so that we can listen to that podcast with the monkey.
I'm telling you. Yeah, I'm telling you. It's you can't put the monkey in a cage, okay? He can
Al-Sayed
draw.
will forgive me and he can listen to the podcast from jail, and he will say thank you to me for doing that because it's such a good idea.
Put the commies in prison. We need more actual. It's like the thing I was saying about the politicians. We have a lot of podcasters that are secretly monkeys and but are posing as humans. We need a real honest monkey behind a Shure SM7B right now.
Well, I mean,
Just
I'm going to break
chaos.
rank a little. I'm going to break rankle here a little bit. I don't normally weigh in on these, but I think that the monkey might be the best choice for president here. I mean, how many monkeys can draw? And if this monkey can learn to draw, what else can he learn to do?
What else is he
We've
hiding?
tried humans
Be
for...
conservative, I hope.
Well, maybe. I mean, you would expect a monkey to probably have more like traditional leanings, but it probably pertains more to monkeydom than it does to humanity. So maybe
Whatever
there's
that-
some differences in priority there. I'd put James Talarico as the podcaster because I think he's a very eloquent speaker. And to James's point, I think that he articulates certain ideas in a framing that might reach people who would otherwise be too off put by the liberal gayness of it all, I suppose you could say. And Abdul Al-Sayed, I'm probably the most, well, I guess the monkey that learned to draw. I just learned about him today. But I'll say it, I'm not super familiar with his policies. I've read a little bit. A lot of it seems, some of it I'm interested in, and some of it seems like, just like billionaire tax sloppulism type stuff. For that reason, I will default to putting him in prison. But I'm not as pessimistic about him as many people on the right are, to be sure. So a little bit different from what both of you said, but whether he deserves it or not, Abdul is unfortunately the common link between all of our arrangements there. Well, with that said, what a great way to end our scheduled programming for the evening. And Jeb, thank you so much for humoring us with that excellent game of... Hang on, I need to figure out my damn sex worker light. It's always right in the way when I'm trying to switch. Here we go. All right, back to full screen. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a great show. You're under no obligation to stay. But we do have somebody waiting in the waiting room. LethalLance, a member of our community, would like to call into the show. Jeb, any interest in hanging out and seeing what LethalLance has to say?
I have like 10 minutes. I have a friend who randomly decided they're down the street and
Cool.
wants to come over. But I can do 10 minutes with LethalLance if it's me, he like wants to ask. If not, then...
Well, he's been hanging out in the waiting room for a while, so hopefully he's looking to talk to you. Well, let's bring him in and see what he has to say. Lethal, thank you so much for hanging out with us. You're on the Marketplace of Ideas once again, sir. How are you?
Welcome, neighbor.
Hello. Do I have a better mic now?
Oh, you
great.
sound so good.
Sounds good to me.
That is, oh my God. That's so good.
I bought those wireless earbuds, and I'm like, man, these are going to be so much better than the last ones. And then they sounded like complete and utter garbage.
Alrighty,
Well,
do you have
these
a
are
little-
pristine.
you have a
Little
question
tiny
for
boom
us?
mic.
You have a
Well,
question
it's
for us
working well
today?
for you. Yeah, we're under a little bit of a time crunch. Jeb has a friend who wants to hang out, but I saw you hanging in there for so long that I wanted to give you a shot to hang out with and say your piece.
Yeah, I mostly wanted to talk to Ryan, but I got a couple of questions for Jeb. I just want to know his definition of communism.
For me, like when I'm tongue in cheek using it, I'm kind of putting general the defaulting to the idea that government intervention generally leads to better outcomes than not. That's how I use it when I'm being tongue in cheek. But obviously, if I'm being in a very literal, serious conversation, I see communism as the government owning the means of production, and a certain level of attempt to decentralize that, whereas socialism doesn't imply any decentralization of the government ownership of the means of production. I think obviously, like the idyllic communism does.
Okay, but you think socialism also implies government ownership of means of production?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think. I think you're maybe talking about like 1% of what socialists may describe themselves as, but
Yeah,
that's
I
probably
think
a
most
blind spot
socialists.
you might
I think
have.
most socialists mean what I mean when I'm being tongue in cheek, but I mean, socialism almost definitionally means the government seizing the means of production.
How so?
Is that not the definition of socialism? I might be
That's
totally wrong here.
I mean, that's one of the major tenets that people discuss when they discuss
like-
socialism.
How I would think of socialism is basically the workers owning the means of production.
Sure.
Well, and if the
Um,
workers own the government, then in so facto, the
Yeah,
people
right,
in the
'cause-
government own the means of
The workers would have to in order to enforce the fact that they own the means of production, right? Because like from a practical perspective, the workers couldn't maintain ownership of the means of production unless forced, because at the end of the day, scabs are always going to outnumber workers who want to own and have the means to own the means of production. Because that's the issue with socialism is I think a lot of socialists in practice forget that like to have like everything become worker co-ops, the workers all of a sudden need the means to buy into a worker co-op. And so any transition to socialism would imply probably the government assisting in that buying into worker co-ops.
Probably doesn't sound like a definition, though.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to find like a workable definition, because we can do like an idyllic definition, right? Like capitalism's definition is like the free market will make everything better, but I'm not going to give them that credit, right? I'm going to give them the credit of capitalists want rapid and comprehensive deregulation and government out of the economy. I'm not going to give them credit for their idyllic definition of capitalism is the best rising to the top through a process of competitive markets. I'm going to only give them the practical mechanism, which is the deregulation of markets. And then I agree with them, and I hope to see that would make things better. Same with socialists. The practical mechanism would have to be the government buying workers into ownership of businesses and breaking up those businesses to be bought by workers. Because obviously the businesses aren't just going to agree to it.
Yeah, I know you're short on time, so we won't get too much into it. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's the best way to approach definitions is to go like, well, a capitalist ideal is this. Well, a capitalist or a socialist ideals is not a definition of capitalism or socialism. Like I would just say capitalism allows capitalists to own capital. That's all you have to do. You don't have to say anything about regulation. There's like, you can go deeper into it, but I would just like make it general.
I guess when someone's asking me the definition of something, I read it as they're asking me what I think most people who hold that label want. You know, like if they want to look up just the literal definition, they can go to Google. My definition would be, I think most capitalists want the deregulation of markets, and I'm not going to allow them to also claim a positive outcome from that. I'm just going to say, you guys want the deregulation of markets. I happen to be part of you guys in that context. And then for socialists, they want a step toward the government breaking up big companies and allowing and compelling them to be sold to workers. I'm also not going to give them ownership of a positive outcome from that I haven't seen yet either, you know?
Yeah. I think there's also something to look into about socialist thought of like, can a countries are worker owned at 50%? Like, would you consider that a socialist society, or is that still a capitalist? Or you could say mixed to be a cop
Well, it
out.
just it depends on the mechanism, right? So like if 50% of them were owned by worker co-ops because workers in some way compelled them to,
Okay.
I would say it's socialist. If 50% of companies just decided we're going to try this worker co-op thing because it seems economically advantageous, then I would say it's still capitalist, right? Because capitalism doesn't say that workers can't be owners. Socialism says that owners have to be workers. So it's kind of like the compulsion is the differentiating factor to me.
And you think most socialists, what makes them not capitalists is they want to compel capital owners to give up their capital.
Yes.
You don't think the majority of socialists think, well, I think it's better to, like, if we have a vote, and then if we can maybe even create firms. I want to incentivize the creation of co-ops. Like, what if we had a policy where it's like worker co-ops get heavily advantageous, like, tax deals?
That in my opinion, that would be a form of compulsion, because I know there's a recency bias there, right? Like, the new thing we're doing is just providing an incentive, whereas I look at it more comprehensively of, like, you sort of re-audit the framework every time something's passed. It doesn't matter what's new. You're punishing people for not being worker co-ops by taxing them more aggressively. It doesn't matter what came first. You're punishing people who aren't.
You're not taxing them.
co-ops.
I mean, you're taxing them the same. You're giving someone preferential treatment doesn't mean you're punishing everyone else.
To me, it does. From a temporal sense, you're right. Like, from a temporal sense, you are just newly incentivizing this thing. But as someone who is sort of like more conservative and libertarian, I believe in things like zero-based budgeting and this principle of continuous auditing. And so in my continuous auditing sort of methodology of observing government, I would say it doesn't matter when each policy came into place. If you are taxing non-worker co-ops more aggressively than worker co-ops, you're punishing non-worker co-ops. Whether it doesn't matter what came first, you know?
That sounds like progressive thought to me, because if you look at Trump tax cuts, I'm like, well, they are disproportionately advantageous to, the upper class. Does that necessarily mean they're punishing the lower class? Well, it sounds like you would say yes.
I would say yeah. Yes, I would.
Well,
but I don't think
nice.
Trump is a very conservative person. Conservative. I think Trump is a very progressive Republican. If you look at his policies, in terms of government exertion of power, Trump is a very socialist Republican. I mean, that dude is about as Nixon Republican as it gets.
Well, yeah, he's the most communist president we've ever had. Like, he's actually just state communism, taking to state and intel.
I would say FDR was considerably more communist than Trump, I would say, but he's close. Yeah, Trump's in the top 5 for sure.
Did FDR have the government take ownership of a private company?
I believe so. I mean, he completely he like ravaged entire private industries, and he also
would it be fair to ask you which company? Just like name one?
I don't know about which individual company. The New Deal definitely took like unprecedented control of private industry, though. I'd have to look more into specifics in terms of like what companies were most deeply affected. Because I don't know what specific company Trump took full public ownership of.
Not full, but he took partial ownership of Intel.
I did just look it up on Google. The Clanker says Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not support privatizing companies. Instead, his administration greatly expanded the federal government's role in regulating and nationalizing key private industries. His goal was to combat the Great Depression and limit the power of massive corporate monopolies.
Yeah, I don't see like subsidies, regulation, like that's all. You could say that
that's investment.
Reverse incentives, and they're close. You're increasing the connection to the government, but like as far as I'm aware, what Trump did with Intel was unprecedented. Like, it has never been done in American history where the federal government has taken ownership of a U.S. company.
It is pretty insane that we've the left has endured accusations of socialism and communism for since before Obama, and here we have Donald Trump actually buying stake in a U.S. company.
And literally not a single human being cares. Not a single person cares.
Well, no. So I care.
Obama
to be clear,
did it.
my thing isn't that I don't care. My thing is that the scale of Trump taking percent ownership in Intel is likely like 1/1000th the impact of FDR's New Deal. Whether you have a favorable view or a non-favorable view of the New Deal, I think everyone would agree that the impact of the New Deal is far greater than Trump's stake.
It has a greater impact. It doesn't make it
ownership.
more communist.
In a net impact sense, I think it would. And I'm a very practical person, so I'm not necessarily worried as much. The philosophy matters to me, but like if someone is perfectly libertarian and passes one policy versus someone being mostly libertarian passing 70, I'm going to go with the mostly libertarian passing 70. You know,
What is a communist impact? Is it what is a policy that makes us more moneyless, classless society? Like I don't know how the New Deal.
yeah.
was
So like a socialist impact, I think, like I said, that's more in my
Well,
colloquial definition
not
of
not socialist. I said communist.
or communist. Sure, like I said, in my more colloquial sense of using the word, it is getting people to default to the idea that government intervention more often than not is going to create a positive impact rather than a negative. FDR did that the most, and he didn't do it because the New Deal worked well. He did it because the New Deal functionally made it so we could never see a future wherein the private industry got a chance to try. And that's the insidious part. If socialism just won on the merits where it was applied, I wouldn't have an issue with it. The issue is socialists don't want just incentivization of worker co-ops. They don't want companies to just try to be worker co-ops. They want big companies to be forced to be sold, first to be forced to have unions in basically every industry, and then for the workers to be forced to join those unions, and then eventually for those unions to take ownership of the company.
All right,
You know,
Lethal, final
yeah.
thoughts just so we can get Jed out on time so we can hang with his friend but without being late. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap on this topic?
Yeah, I'll just say I probably would. Well, I'm not even a communist or a socialist. I mean, I might like the idea of incentivizing worker co-ops, and that's probably as socialist as I get. But I just don't like the conflation between communism and socialism. I think they're completely two different types of thought. And then the people you will see who label themselves as communists and the people who label themselves as socialists are way, way, way different. And I think that's a difference that's worth actually upholding and being mindful of.
Yeah,
And
I would
I wouldn't
concur
call the
with that.
Democrat Party 50% communist, probably.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lethal. And Jeb, we have a policy here that when somebody calls in, we like to award them with some of our fake money grift coin. We typically go between 0 if you really didn't like the call, or 1,000 if you thought the call was great. How much fake money should we give Lethal here?
I give them 1,000.
The
Usually
full
call-ins,
1,000.
people are coming in just to like shitpost or like be super bad faith. I feel
If
like that
Ryan
was
was
like
still here, you'd be awarding him 0.
Yeah,
He'd be
I
more in
feel like-
shitpost mode, I suspect.
Yeah, I feel like
I would just.
you came
I
in to
treat
very
people
honestly
how
engage.
I think they deserve to be treated. Jeb's way more good faith actor than Ryan, so.
Well, either that or you just wanted to incentivize them to give you more grift coins so you can grow your ever expanding liberalism whaledom within the marketplace of ideas, which of course
Oh, yeah, I take that.
we appreciate the representation. Excellent. Well, thank you so much as always, Lethal, for calling in. We always have a good time with you on air, and we look forward to the next time where we can give you some more GC.
Hell yeah, brothers.
Thanks for coming
All right,
on, brother.
take it easy. And
See
to
you.
Jeb, once again, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thanks for sticking around a little longer and taking a call and playing some games. Have fun with your bud. I hope it's a good night for you, and we hope to have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was awesome.
Thanks
See
for
you guys.
coming
Excellent.
on. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Marketplace of Ideas.